Welcome to Audiobook da Morgan. Today's reading is The Final Chapters of Utz by Bruce Chatwin. But before we start, please subscribe on my channel and press the button to activate notifications.
Chapter 45, Utz by Bruce Chatwin. When reconstructing any story, the wilder the chase, the more likely it is to yield results. Acting on a tip from Ada Krasova, who made a number of veiled allusions to the hammering that used to sound from Utz's apartment, I stationed myself on the corner of Soroka and Maslova streets between 1 and 2 of a drizzly Saturday morning to wait the emptying of the dustbins. In Prague, at least in the older quarters, many citizens have an obsessional relationship with garbage. An apartment building such as number 5 and 6 Soroka Street, built for prosperous bourgeois before the Great War, retains in the foyer the original red and yellow marble facings. But where in the old days there might have stood a console with a vase of artificial flowers, now, in these least fastidious times, the visitor is greeted by a platform of grey, galvanised dustbins of standard size with identical articulated lids. The garbage trucks of Prague are painted a vivid orange. They have been in service for about 15 years. As a warning to motorists, they are mounted with revolving orange lights that flash their beams against the surrounding architecture. These lights and the noise of the vehicle's crushing machinery are the curse of light sleepers, but a source of wonder to insomniacs who will rise from their beds to watch the scene in the street below. The dustmen wear orange overalls with leather aprons to protect them as they roll the bins into the street. I watched the young man remove the refuse of the kosher restaurant and the Jewish town hall before moving on to the Golem restaurant where, earlier in the day, I'd sent back a Galbsfilet judicial act, which was garnished with a slice of ham. He was an energetic young man with laughing eyes and a mop of curly hair. He performed his task with an air of cheerful bravado. The light lit his face into an orange mask. His companion was a big black Doberman pincher, his snout in a basketwork muzzle, who either sat on the passenger seat or hurtled around the block chasing cats, or lovingly resting his forepaws on his master's shoulders. Turning into Soroka Street, the young man manoeuvred the truck arse first against the curb on the opposite side of the Pinkers synagogue. Then, having rolled out the dustbins from number 4, 5 and 6, he stationed them in groups on the sidewalk. An orange arm shot forth from the truck, clamped its claws around the lip of the bin, lifted it upside down into the air and, with a double chakong, chakong, jettisoned the contents into the vehicle's belly. The bin returned to earth with a bang, while from inside the truck came the noise of gnashing, crushing, churning, compressing and the shriek of metal teeth. The Doberman tried to lick my face, but was unable to slide its tongue through the muzzle. The dustman was friendly to the man who had befriended his dog, and to my surprise, spoke English. What was I doing there? I'm a writer, I said. So am I, he said. Many of his colleagues were writers or poets or out-of-work actors. They met on Saturdays to drink in a village near the dump. He gave me directions how to get there. Ask for Ludwig, he said. End of chapter 5. Utz by Bruce Chats. Chapter 46. Utz by Bruce Chatwin. The village was an oasis of orchards and cottage gardens in a waste of industrial pollution. In the garden of roses and hollyhocks, Ludwig was hosing down his truck. He took me to the bar where his friends, in overalls of orange and blue, were knocking back tankards of Pilsen beer. Some read newspapers, some played chess. In a quiet corner, 2 men were playing backgammon. They finished and turned to greet us. One of the men was the Catholic philosopher, Milok, who, as I knew from Imaginaire Publications, was the author of an essay on the self-destructive nature of force. He was a broad-shouldered man with greying sideburns and an open, pink face. he was smoking a Meissen pipe. He told me how, in socialist Czechoslovaquia, everyone over the age of 60 had the right to a state pension, providing he had put in the required years of work. He and his friends preferred not to embroil themselves in white-collar squabbles. Manual labour was better for the mind. Zitek had worked as a gardener, street sweeper and garbage collector, but with 2 years to 60, he found that kind of work exhausting and had got a new job. He was a bike boy. The job was to take computer software across Prague from one computer centre to another. The software fitted in one of these saddlebags, his philosophical treatise into the other. Whenever he made a delivery, the manager of the centre would set aside a room for him to work in. He would work for 3 hours. Sometimes at the end of the day, he read a chapter to an audience of workers. He had some strong things to say about certain Czech writers in exile who, assuming for themselves the mantle of Bohemian culture, neglected what was happening in Bohemia. Zitek's backgammon partner was a man with tremendous biceps and a grinning face latticed with scars. His name was Kosik. He'd gone to America after 68, to Elizabeth, New Jersey, but had returned because the beer was undrinkable. It was he who, in 1973, the year of Utz's first stroke, done the garbage round in the old Jewish quarter. He would thus have emptied Utz's dustbins. I now come to the most difficult part of my story. Once I took it into my head that the Utz collection could have vanished down the moor of a garbage truck, my temptation was to twist every scrap of evidence in that direction. Kosik answered my questions with amused good humour, but I am doubtful in retrospect whether his answers were genuine or the answers I wanted to hear. I cannot place much reliance on the image he spun for me, that, when clearing the bins of number 5 Soroka Street, he sometimes saw a shady figure flatten himself or herself against the back wall of the entrance lobby. One night, he said, a pair of figures appeared at the window of the top floor apartment and waved. I felt I was on a firmer ground with Kosik's second story. Here, at least, there was a measure of agreement among his drinking companions. They agreed that 10 or 12 years ago, more maybe, a taxi used to bring an elderly couple to the village for a Sunday afternoon stroll. The man was shorter than the woman, shuffled his feet, and had to be supported by her arm. They would walk along the lane as far as the wire fence surrounding the dump, and then walk back to the taxi. I walked along the lane. The fields were overgrown with ragwort and willow herb. Factory chimneys were churning clouds of brown smoke in the direction of the city. The sky was a tie in a tangle of electric cables. I came to the fence. A rank of bulldozers stood opposite a shed. Beyond lay the dump, an area of raw earth and refuse, with seagulls screaming over it. I walked back to the village, thinking over the various possibilities. Had Utz or Marta smuggled the collection abroad? No. Had the museum officials smuggled it abroad? No. Dr. Frankfurter would have known. Did Utz destroy his porcelains out of pique? I was doubtful. He loathed museums, but he was not a vindictive man. But he was a joker. I felt it might have appealed to his sense of the ridiculous that these brittle rococo objects should end up on a 20th century trash heap. Or was it a case of iconoclasm? Is there, alongside the tendency to worship images, which Baudelaire called my unique, my primitive passion, a counter-tendency to smash them to bits? Do images, in fact, demand their own destruction? Or was it Marta? Did she have the vindictive streak? Did she connect Utz's love of porcelain with his love for opera singers? If so, having got rid of one lot, she might as well get rid of the other. No, my impression is that none of these theories will work. I believe that, in reviewing his life during those final months, he regretted having always played the trickster. He regretted having wheedled himself and the collection out of every tight corner. He had tried to preserve in microcosm the elegance of European court life, but the price was too high. He hated the grovelling and the compromise, and in the end the porcelains disgusted him. Marta had never given in. She had never once lowered her standards, never lost her craving for legitimacy. She had stayed the course. She was his eternal Columbine. My revised version of the story is that, on the night of their wedding in church, she emerged from the bathroom in her pink art silk dressing gown and, unloosening the girdle, let it slide to the floor and embraced him as a true wife. And from that hour they passed their days in passionate adoration of each other, resenting anything that might have come between them, and the porcelains were bits of old crockery that simply had to go. End of chapter 46. Utz! Bruce chats. The final chapter, 47 of the book Utz by Bruce Chatwin. I'm very pleased to have come to the end of this fantastic story, and I'm very happy for your time and patience. Glenn Morgan signing off. The village of Kosteli lies close to the Austrian border, near the watershed between the Danube and the Elbe. The wheat fields have been invaded by biblical tares, but the cornflowers, the poppies, knapweed, scabious and the larkspur make one rejoice in the beauty of a European countryside as yet unpoisoned by selected weed killers. On the edge of the village there are watered meadows, and beyond there is a lake where carp are raised, half encircled with a stand of pines. The houses of the village have red-tiled roofs, and their walls are freshly washed with ochre and white. The women plant germinations in their window boxes. On the village green there is a well-tended chapel with a tiny dome. Beside the chapel there is a base of a monument which once would have borne the double Ks, Kaiserlich and Königlich, of the dual Habsburg monarchy. It now supports a rusty, lopsided contraption commemorating a Soviet foray into space. A storm was passing. The thunderheads rolled away and a rainbow arched over the water meadows. Sun-illuminated gardens of yellow rhododendron, purple phlox, and banks of white Shasta daisies. I unlatched a wicket gate. A snow-white gander flapped towards me, craning his neck and hissing. An old peasant woman came to the door. She wore a flowered housecoat and a white scarf low over her forehead. She frowned. I murmured a word or two, and her face lit up in an astounded smile, and she raised her eyes to the rainbow and said, "Ja, ich bin den Baron von Utz." The end of Utz. Author Bruce Chatwin. And your reader today was Glenn Ronald Morgan. Thank you.